Okay, looking very much forward to this next one. It is entitled "The Government of Ontario Showcasing Gold in Ontario." We started off talking today a little bit about the importance of gold production and where it's coming in the world as these geopolitical tensions rise. Certainly makes me feel a lot better as a Canadian knowing that there's some great projects coming up in Ontario, and a lot of that is thanks to Minister Pirie, who's doing an amazing job. He is a mining person, so he knows what's going on in this industry. We're going to have Colin McClelland, our editor-in-chief, is going to be leading this conversation. Colin joined the Northern Miner in 2022. He's covered the Angolan Civil War for Reuters, staying on our geopolitical tension theme. He's covered African oil, mining, hedge funds, private equity, and banks for Bloomberg News, and run Associated Press coverage in Canada. Along the way, he's had stints at CBC and the Financial Post, and he's based out of Toronto in our Toronto office. Colin, why don't you take the stage, and I'll let you introduce your panel.
Good morning, hello. Great, thanks. Welcome to the Ontario panel. I'd like to call up to the stage. He's already been here, but Ross Beatty, I guess maybe doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'll say a few words. He's been in the mining business since the 1970s. He's in the Order of Canada, developed Pan American Silver into the second largest silver producer by market value at $11.3 billion. And he's a strong environmentalist. We know that from earlier conversations. I caught him whale watching the other day. Now he's targeting 1 million ounces of gold annually as chairman of Equinox Gold. Welcome to the stage, Ross Beatty. And next we have Renaud Adams, president and CEO of IAMGOLD. He's got more than 30 years experience around the world. At Richmont, he doubled production and tripled reserves. At Island Mine in Northern Ontario, he cut costs to one of the lowest in the Americas. Now he's steering IAMGOLD's Côté Mine in North Ontario with new advances in technology to be one of Canada's largest gold mines. Renaud Adams. And then George Pirie is Ontario's Minister of Mines. He spent decades in the mining business around Timmins in Northern Ontario, where he's from. His family's been there for more than a century. He was head of Placer Dome, then one of Canada's largest miners. And later, he was the mayor of Timmins. Now he's leading the province's strategy on northern minerals feeding southern industry. Let's hear him for Minister George Pirie. So I'd like to start with you, Ross. Equinox Gold, Greenstone mine just started this past year. Pretty exciting stuff. You're ramping up there. What kind of lessons have you learned there, and why does it show how Ontario's a great place to operate?
Well, first of all, hello everyone. Again, they're making me work for my supper here. I'm going to just start by saying a little kind of a story. I have, as many of you know, a long history in this business, and my very first company was a company called Equinox Resources, which I started in 1985. And you know, we had all kinds of projects in all kinds of places, but we had flow-through years then. So I had a company that was interested in spending some flow-through money, and I partnered with them they put up the money, and I found the project, and I ended up getting a property in Ontario. First time I'd ever worked in Ontario in 1987, and it was called Maud Lake, not very far from where you grew up, Minister. And well, of course, the project was a complete dog. We started with 1 million ounces and ended up with 150,000 ounces after going underground and declared it a disaster. So that was it. And after that, it was an okay experience. I was young. I didn't really know very much. Rick Roll was one of our big shareholders at the time. He was very unimpressed, I know. So after that, starting in the 90s, I actually left Canada and went down to South America, to Mexico, you know, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, like everywhere in South America. And I spent most of my career there after that. I had sojourns in Africa and Russia and Asia. I basically worked in, I think, 18 different countries after my experience in Ontario. And then I started Equinox Gold in 2018. And happily, we got some projects, we got some mines in Brazil, we have a mine in Mexico, one in the United States, and then we ended up acquiring a company called Premier Gold Mines, which had this big gold deposit in northern Ontario near Thunder Bay called Greenstone. So all of a sudden, after that's almost 40 years, 35 years anyway, I'm back in Canada. And, you know, so for the last 3 years, Equinox Gold has worked really hard on building this big gold mine, which is now Canada's third or fourth largest gold mine, depending on how big Côté becomes. And it's a big mine. We spent 3 years building it. We spent about 1.3 billion US, or 1.8 billion Canadian, say. And it just opened, and we poured our first gold in May, and we're just doing the commission ramp up and all that stuff right now. It's doing well. So after 35 years, I'm back in Ontario, and let me tell you, after a whole career in Latin America, it's just been a dream. It's been an incredible joy to work in Canada again, especially in Northern Ontario. You have just everything you need to be successful in the mining business there, provided that you have social license. And we have social license. The company has spent years and years and years developing goodwill with the community around this little town called Geraldton, with the 5 First Nations that work there. Once you have their support, other things become easy. The government has been supportive. We've got this great workforce in Northern Ontario. They understand mining. Of course, Ontario is a mining province. Canada is a mining country. It's just been a huge success. We've built the mine on time, on budget, and it's really in part to the location where we are. So I have
That's great.
massive kudos about Ontario, and what a joy it is to be able to work in places you speak English.
Yeah. Renaud, I wanted to bring you in, and because you've had maybe a similar experience at Côté, starting up recently, and some relations with the First Nations, and getting social license there as well. Your water projects and.
Absolutely. Well, not my first experience in Ontario. So as you mentioned in the intro, I was leading Richmond Mines. We had the flagship Island Gold Mine in Ontario. I spent 4 years in the New Gold as well, with over 16 different relationship and partnership in the First Nations, Indigenous. And this one, Côté Gold, which I knew very well from my first past time at IM Gold back in time. So I was on the due diligence, really liked the project, really liked the potential of it. And here I am. We were building it when I came back. But a few things that is very important about this project beyond the economics per se. It has already shaped completely this company. IM Gold used to be 80% plus of his business overseas in West Africa, South America. And now we're over 80% of our business in Ontario and growing. Right. By the time the decision was made to build the project, we're sitting at about 8.5 million ounces of resources. By the time it was built, we were sitting on 20 million ounces. So at the very early days, you set the tone to what you want to be down the road. What kind of example you want to set, in relationship. And you mentioned on the First Nations, and I think the best person to describe it will be the Chief Jennifer Constant, that talk about our relationship as a marriage. Right. Doesn't talk about it as a contractual obligation, talks about it, as a marriage. So what you do in a marriage, you pay attention to what matters to the others. And what matters to First Nations, of course, has a lot to do with, yes, of course, social economics and all that. And I think everyone's benefiting extremely well from government to us, to our stakeholders. Right. But water matters. Yeah. Protections of water, biodiversity water matters. And one of the very key things, first time I've seen something like that on my career, maybe Russ has seen something like this, was the literally recreating. This is Northwest Ontario, so we have water. We have water in Ontario, and we had to move water to build Côté Gold. And I would remember the early days, I was there 12 years ago looking at it, trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? And kudos to the team there in the past
Right.
management. They engaged at the very early days, engaged with the First Nations. This is not like draining water. This is literally recreating a lake with the fish habitat and so forth. And that was done in a partnership with the First Nation. They come up with a new name and water celebrations and all that. So this is one of the example of how you could do the right thing first at the first day. And in our case, it was really about preserving water and biodiversity.
And now, Minister, doing the right thing first, I mean, laying the groundwork is Ontario's new mining code. And can you tell us about that and some of the changes it's made and maybe the push you want to get to reduce permitting time?
Yeah, really and truly, thanks very much for the question, and it's always a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I became the Minister of Mines a little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when it was interesting, the connection with Renault, because Renault worked with together at Breakwater Resources, and my first time I met with Ross was Breakwater Resources. Actually, we wanted to get the Nefson deposit from you. We weren't successful, but it's a small industry. But Côté Lake was fundamental for me becoming a Minister of Mines, because it took so damn long to get the thing permitted. And the first thing that we did was said, we got to modernize the Mining Act, and basically, it's a very good act. I mean, we didn't change a single word to Ontario's world-class environmental standards, nor the duty to consult. The objective was to get rid of to get out of the way and make the business of mining take at the same pace as permitting mining. So obviously we've got to be at the pace of business, and that's what the regulation is all about. I mean, that's the new Mining Act is all about. Just and so we can shorten the time to get permits across the line, so that we build these mines quicker, as for gold and critical minerals.
That's fantastic. Now, one of the exciting things the past year, of course, has been the price of gold skyrocketed. I was wondering, Ross and Renaud, you want to weigh in on how that's maybe affecting your business decisions at your mine, returning cash to shareholders, or perhaps using money for expansion. How do you evaluate that?
Well, it's a happy problem. It's actually a double benefit, because not only is the gold price up in U.S. dollars, but it's way up in Canadian dollar terms. So gold price is at a record in U.S. dollar terms, but it blew through the record in Canadian dollar terms, a couple of years ago.
Right.
And so we have this great exchange rate, which helps. Low cash costs at both our operations, I think. So it's just a money spinner right now. And our timing of opening up this mine, just as this gold price has gone bananas this year, has been a pretty happy one. How are we going to use the money? Well, we've got to make it first. I mean, it's one thing to do it on paper, but it's another thing to actually do it in reality. And we're still scaling up the operation from zero to an annual rate of about 400,000 ounces a year, which we're going to hit sometime next year. So it's in that scale-up period that we're very, very happy to have this high gold price and an ability to generate more cash flow. We've got a lot of debt. We pay our debt down first, and then, of course, the happy choice, share buybacks, dividends, buy and build new mines, that kind of stuff. First, you got to make it before you can have those choices.
And Renaud?
A bit of the same with the canvas that Côté Gold, $3 billion investment. So at the time was a 3-to-1. You're a $1 billion company market cap, and you're building at $3 billion. So not an easy task. I started to look at this opportunity. Gold price was in the 1,800. Here I'm sitting today $1,000 more. So I think the first thing that we've decided to do, and I think honor, is to not repeat the mistake of the past. Margin matters, right? So we're still designing our mine at $1,500 an ounce, and really to make sure on the so a lot for us has been accelerating. My plan that I had to turn around this company and reposition has been accelerated by about 2 years. We were buying back the 10% from our partner Sumitomo. We had 150,000 ounces of prepaid. We already half through. We're going to be done in 2 quarters. We're going to be addressing our expensive debt, cost and level of debt. So it's a lot of advancing. We'd advance a lot the transformations of the turnaround at the Westwood mine in Quebec as well, so we could do more there. We did the same in Burkina Faso. So we're entering 2025 in a completely different position. And I believe by July next year, what it would have done for us is for the first time in the last 10 years, we would be producing at the 850,000 attributable all free cash flowing, and it's going to be completely different. And that was supposed to happen in 27. So it's a lot of accelerating the repositioning for us.
Right, but at the same time, I guess the companies face challenges in Ontario and across the industry in a bit of a labor shortage. And I'm sure the province, is investing in certain areas there, Minister, to help attract new people to the industry and perhaps demystify mining for the general public.
Well, really and truly, I think we've done a great job on that. I mean, recent surveys have shown that 72% of the population in Ontario supports mining and 76% want to see more of it.
Right.
You just had an excellent presentation or visit, I guess, by a group of high school students and they were amazed, and they went to Côté Lake, what a mine really looks like. I think some of the observations of the kids thought they were stepping into a NASA location, looking at the control room. But yes, on attracting the labor force. We've got a number of initiatives within Ontario, both within the universities and colleges, with the Ministry of Education, where we're allowing kids that are interested in trades to express that interest as early as grade 10 and participate in college programs earlier. We've also got the skills development program, and we just recently announced the highest single investment with actually it matched the largest single investment we had in a company. It was $10 million with Ignico, and it's again to attract and also train individuals into the mining industry. By 2035, we're going to have a requirement of about another 8,000 employees. That means another 40,000 people into Northern Ontario. So it's a multifaceted approach to attract, build infrastructure, make sure the communities are ready to build their homes and houses and subdivisions across all of Northern Ontario, east and west and central.
Right, and I guess the training is a factor at your company as well, IAMGOLD, Renault. How are you addressing that kind of a labor shortage concerns?
I think Minister just nailed it when he talked about, when you start like shifting from the more like innovative way to do things and the technology. So we see that playing a tremendous role for us. Like Côté Gold has been a kind of a curiosity, about the technology. We're the first North American mine to initiate operations using autonomous truck fleet and the drilling as well, and that has creating a buzz. And
right.
And Minister mentioned the tour we had with the Grade 9 that also make a huge difference. So, and of course, in the short term, the innovations in technology kind of play a role as well to mitigate a bit of that shortage. Of course, we have reduced enormously the need for operator in the short term using the technology. We're moving towards like data, analytic data and so forth. I truly believe that AI is the next generations of how you would transform mining. And especially when you have access, to close university, you could do work. So this is what I see. I see like mining is mining. You would never escape, from the fundamental of what it is. But where we could make a difference, starting with Ontario and Canada, is to make it more attractive, more interesting, more innovative technology. And AI is the next generation of it. And
right.
I think we would have seen the true transformation the day you would see company like mining company looking for computer science and kind of Silicon Valley type of
the
thing.
Minister wants
Yeah, I'd like to follow up with a couple more points I should have mentioned as well. And again, that's in relation to our Ministry of Education. where we're developing curriculum that's specifically developed for high school kids, and it'll go all across Ontario. We've got a natural form when you think about the auto plants that are being and battery plants that are going into Rockville to St. Thomas to Windsor, to ensure the kids know exactly where the materials are coming from. The other area, of course, that we're working with is in the Indigenous peoples. It's a fact of life. The fastest growing segment of our population is the Indigenous youth. So things like micro-credentials. So the individuals, the kids that want to get involved, I mean, they'll get micro-credentials so that they can participate in the industry faster. We got to take advantage. It's our job to set the table, and that's what we're trying to do.
And Ross, over the decades, you've probably seen a massive transition in labor force and knowledge across the industry.
Yeah, I mean, well, yes and no. I mean, mining has always been a core Canadian skill.
Right.
And so it's one of the things that Canada does really well. It's a center of excellence in Canada. We are a mining country. We have good schools. We have a lot of companies that give a lot of on-the-job training. We have lots of mines. Mining is not a bad name the way it is in some places in Latin America, in the world.
But there is concern there that there's only half the registration in universities for geology as there was, a few decades ago.
Yeah, that's true. It is not as attractive as certain industries, but I never get too fussed at that. If the jobs are there, if they're well paid, you're going to end up having students go into those areas. When I was a kid in university in the 70s, things are very cyclical. And when metal prices are high, there's tons of jobs, and they're really well-paid jobs, like right now.
Right.
And a lot of people go into schools because they want those high-paid jobs. And then, of course, as soon as they graduate, things are out of cycle, and they end up being school teachers or insurance salesmen or whatever. But those who can get over those cycles end up with long-term jobs like I had. It's a lot of fun. It's I was a geologist, so I wasn't a kind of a tech geek or an engineer. And I've had a wonderful career. I've had just a dream career. I had two things I wanted to do when I was young, which is to work outside, work in nature, and work in a place I could travel. And I did both. I mean, I was paid to travel. I was paid to climb mountains. I just thought this is like pinch me. I would have done this for free, and I got paid to do them. And so whenever I talk to young people these days who are interested in geology specifically, which is my background, I just say, you get paid to do things you would do for free. It's a great job. It's a great thing to do, and a lot of people are doing that. It's the engineering that's a little more complicated: geological engineering, mining engineering. But once again, I don't fuss that too much. The world is small now, and we hire from all over Latin America to work in Canada. People come because we're a great country, and Ontario is a mining place, and we have the best miners in the world there. They can learn the best and most modern techniques. We mine at the lowest costs, and so it's a good place to go.
What are your concerns about wage inflation, though, at this high point in the cycle? High metal price and...
Yeah, it's like everything is you have to deal with all that stuff. Wage inflation, inflation of all costs. You just have to deal with it. It's part of the business of mining. You have to control your costs as best you can, and you have to cross your fingers and hope the gold price stays high. That's pretty simple. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Isn't it simple? Don't know.
I believe so. And if it's from you, I believe it. So it's all good.
Minister, I want to change tack a bit. Can you bring in more of the strategy the province has about the minerals in the north, industry in the south? It's been like $44 billion, I think, invested in battery plants, assembly lines. How is that going?
Well, first of all, I mean, that's our critical mineral strategy is based on securing the supply chain. I think everybody learned that during COVID, when plants were shut down because of microchip that used to be produced in Southern California is now in some other jurisdiction that nobody's got access to. So the back of our critical mineral strategy is about securing the supply chain and identifying, and that starts identifying where the minerals are. We've got an incredible group of scientists that largely centered in Sudbury, the Ontario Geological Society, that have been working, laboring. They've never really stopped, whether the prices are up or down. They know where the deposits are. That's the first step, is identifying them, and then we've combined that with exploration incentives as well, of innovation incentives as well, so that it'll be processed there as well. So it's matching the mineral potential in Northern Ontario and matching with the industrial might in Southern Ontario. But on the top of that, adding value-added products in Northern Ontario at the same time. It's a fact of life, rare earths. If the Chinese embargoed the rare earths right now, we'd be out of business, because the rare earths are required to build the magnets that are required to build the motors to build the electric vehicles. We've got them in Ontario, 20 miles west of Otter Rapids. Cesium. I mean, just 6 months ago, we're talking about a discovery of cesium. It's the only deposit of cesium globally. But where is it stockpiled? In China. So all these things are intertwined with the price of gold, because gold, of course, is a function of, again, the geological or the geopolitical pressures and that we all know that are in place right now. So yeah.
Yeah, and do you have any kind of comment on the sort of tariff war that's emerging between the U.S. and perhaps Canada?
Well, sure. I mean,
like it's,
yeah. I mean, our premier is doing a marvelous job. I think he's the best leader we have in Canada to lead to deal with that potential threat in the Americas. But we're well positioned, because I mean, when we look at our critical minerals, we look at it from the lens of weaning ourselves with fossil fuels. The Americans see it as through the lens of national security. And we have 80% of those minerals are controlled by the Chinese, but we have them in Northern Ontario. I think that puts us in a strong position in dealing with any potential tariffs that might result. And you just saw the president-elect just yesterday talking about 100% tariffs on the BRIC companies if they're trying to develop other currencies. It speaks well to the strength of gold. Gold's going to be strong for quite some time.
Right. And Ross, you're nodding your head there with maybe some thoughts on the tariff situation. No.
No. I was nodding my head because, you mentioned President Trump. Every day he wakes up in the morning, he has some outrageous, bomb he wants to throw in, and
right.
Whether it happens or not is a whole different thing. But anyway.
Yeah. I'll turn to you, Renaud. At Côté, it's going to be, a huge mine. How's that changing how the company operates?
I think, for us is a complete shift, right? So as I mentioned, moving from 9 countries to a focus in Canada, 80% of the business. I look down the road the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years. It's all about growing Côté from the model of 7.5 million ounces to the 20 million ounces. We don't need to think, necessary acquisitions and growth in organic growth. We have it all at the Côté Gold. And where I see also what is changes for us is we mentioned, like the technology. So we want to continue that way for sure. In particular, how we interact with the water, the biodiversity. But to Ross' point, geology and mining engineering in Canada. So this is where we want to make a difference as well. I think we could. I've at the early days, long time ago, use technology, AI, for exploration targets. We know that we're now in the building of block models. What I see in the next 5 years is how could you apply it as well to literally, build the most valuable, mine plan using this technology. We're still using a lot of geologists and engineering and doing job, and hours of logging cores and things that, technology could replace today. We try to do in months. It would take months to come up with the best optimized mine plan. All those things could shift completely, on how we do business in a more valuable way. So for us, the next few years, we will continue to shift our business more Canadian, of course. We still have this mine in Burkina Faso. It's operating extremely well, brings a lot. But as we deplete, it's just bringing more for us.
That's a difficult jurisdiction there, Burkina Faso. It's one of these string of dictatorships across Africa. Ross, you've had some experience in difficult places too. How would you approach?
Ontario?
Yeah. What's your
How do you
comparison?
spell dream? How do you spell dream? Yeah, I mean, well, we're working right now. Equinox Gold was built, it's a very young company. It's only 6 years old. And we've sort of gone bananas with acquisitions. We acquired 4 mines and built a couple of mines in Brazil and acquired a mine in Mexico, acquired a mine in California, built a mine in California, and then of course we built Greenstone. So we have 7 mines now and a whole bunch of growth all over the place. But all I can say is compared to all the places I've worked, you just can't get any better than Northern Ontario. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
It's just been a delight to work there. And Greenstone, of course, because of its size now, is our biggest mine by far. So it's going to be the engine. But you think about mining, if it's not just the capital cost that brings wealth to a community, it's really the revenue that comes from the earth. So as an example, Côté and Greenstone, they're each going to generate, what's yours, 350, 400,000 ounces a year, more or less?
Yeah, 400.
400, say. Ours is around 400. So, that's $2 billion a year. $2 billion a year, year after year after year. Brand new wealth creation from the earth through the mining industry that is going to support hospitals and schools and taxes and thousands of workers, thousands direct and even more thousands indirect. It's just this engine of wealth creation. And we see that right now. We've only been producing now for 6 months in the Geraldton area of Northern Ontario, where that little number 7 is. And we see the hospital is better. It's supporting the community better. We're seeing businesses springing up all over the place in this very underdeveloped, poor part of Northern Ontario. It's just magical to see that transformation of a community. The First Nations, the 5 First Nations I mentioned, we've got impact benefit agreements with. To see the wealth coming to those communities from the new employment. 20% of our workers are Indigenous. It's just been marvelous, and that's what mining brings you. And that's one of the reasons Ontario is such a great place to mine, because it has that historical infrastructure that's come from the mining industry, so we can get good workers, we have new technology, lots of suppliers that understand the business. That's why it's been such a successful place for us, and I know for IM Gold.
Absolutely.
And Minister, I'm sure you have a list of incentives or things that can tick the boxes for certain companies that want to come to Ontario or to help the juniors that are here.
Well, again, I mean, I think Ross has talked about it a lot when we talk about the environment within in which to mine within Ontario. I did want to do. I mean, Ross was a little bit humble, but when we talk about looking at that Greenstone mine, I mean, it was an old tech mine or Long Lac Mines that was bought by Barrick. They didn't even try to mine it. They reclaimed it. But then if you take a look at what's Greenstone's doing, they are improving it. They're cleaning up a lot of legacy. They're making it better because of how they mine. Same as exactly what's happening in Côté Lake. That was a hard scrabble operation, and they put it into place, and they've cleaned up a legacy, and that's again part of what Ontario does. I mean, the definition of sustainability is meeting the needs of the current generation without harming the next generation, and that's what we do in Ontario. That's why I think the investment is attracted into Ontario. Number one, it's our grid. It's green. We've got to double our power grid with 2033, I think it is, and we're going to do it in a green fashion. We have, again, our role is to set the table. Again, the new Mining Act, the new regulations that were rolled out in April. We've got another batch of them that we've just announced last week as well. And again, working together within the ministries, so that we break down our silos and we get the permitting done faster. So in fact, there's a sense of urgency to our task from a critical minerals strategy point of view, as well as gold, because it is all tied in together.
That's great. I wonder if Anthony there might want to pass the microphone around, and maybe we could see if we have some questions from the audience. as we wind down.
Start with
We've
Rick,
got a
he's in
few.
the front row. Here you go.
Don't give the mic to that man.
Not surprisingly, Russ, initially directed to you, but anybody can fill in. I'm curious with your discussion about the social benefits to Northern Ontario from mining and the wealth creation. When you're financing something like this project in Ontario, what percentage of the total revenues would you suggest go to social rent? Or put differently, what percentage of the net present value created by investment goes back to society? I think the broad society looks at mining as being extractive in the worst sense, which is to say we take wealth that they might believe belongs to the commons.
Yeah.
We secure it for our own purposes.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of what proportion of the net present value of a mine
Sure.
goes to social rent and what part goes to capital?
Yeah.
And also,
I'm laughing because
how does Ontario compete with the rest of the world?
sure.
in
I'll
very rough
start.
terms?
Yeah,
And
please.
Sir, do you want to start?
Be my gift.
Thanks, Rick. Very good question. And actually, it was particularly insightful because he asked what percentage of the net present value, as opposed to what percentage of the general revenue, the gross revenue. So gross revenue is somewhat irrelevant because what percentage of the gross revenue goes to the local non-mining company, really, right? Society. That depends on the costs of that particular mine. So for example, Greenstone, our costs are low. Our costs are going to be $1,000 an ounce, more or less. So there's a very, very broad spread there that will go to the non-society element that will actually come to the company. Whereas if a mine was a high-cost mine, and we have a bunch of those, we receive almost nothing. So, for example, if you're producing gold at $2,000 an ounce or $2,200 an ounce, the way we're unfortunately are at a couple of our mines, very little comes to us, and an awful lot of that revenue goes to the local community and other components of the cost structure, taxes, royalties that are independent of how much profit you make. But so the percentage, Rick, I would say on average would be about 70% typically, or 75% would go to society, and about 20 to 25% would go to the company.
Payroll, I'm interested really in social rents.
But that includes payroll. Yeah.
Offsite capital contributions.
Yeah, suppliers, those are all, the non kind of company wealth that would go to dividends and capital accumulation within the company. 75, 80% perhaps.
So what I can add to this is, I've worked quite a bit of overseas, if you want to compare one with another. So this is becoming more difficult now. We know the situation in Mali, Burkina Faso, new mining code. But back in time, it was designed that if you would take what we would call the free carried, you would take the royalties, you would take the taxes, the payroll tax, the income tax, all in. At the end of the day, you look at the bottom line, and we were like coming out with almost like a 50-50 type of approach, right? So for the state, on all kind of tax and so forth, and now you had the surtax. You look in Canada, it's different, so it's maybe not as a burden, but I would think that net there must be at least a 30-40% one way and another that is redistributed. With the canvas that we don't have those maybe the 5 or 10% of free carried and so forth, but we have IBAs as well with our partners and so forth. So I would say it's less, but I was very comfortable to operate for many years overseas, in a concept that at the end of the day, when you really look at the free cash flow out of it, it really looks like a 50-50 benefit.
Well, no, really, it's interesting that you pose the question that way. Because I think it drives what miners in Ontario to be better, because we're price takers. So the price goes up and goes down, and we have to become more and more and more efficient. My whole career, I think we invented words. We didn't talk about layoffs. It was right sizing. It was this. It was that. That's why our mills are so good. That's why our technology is so high. Because we have to maintain that social license. We have to maintain the ability to provide the return to all of society You're quite right. When the prices are low and there's no margins, there is no opportunity to share, to give dividends or anything else. But quite frankly, I mean, that's what's driven, that's why Ontario miners are so good.
Okay, we have time for two more. We have one here, and then we'll come to the gentleman.
I wanted to follow up on the homage.
Can we get this mic going, please?
Am I on? I wanted to follow up on the homage that Ross Beattie made to the state of Ontario, which is the most well-endowed state, I think, in the world for minerals. But Minister Pirie is the most experienced mining minister of any country in the world, of which I'm aware. What I would like to know is, instead of a politician making a difference, can a politician lead a transformation? And what Canada and Ontario has got that the world needs more than anything else is nickel sulfides, because you can't get your EVs manufactured in North America without the nickel and the cobalt. And China is not a good source for motor manufacturers. Russia is out of the question, but the endowment in Ontario of nickel, I think, is more than any other state in the world. And you can deliver it from Sudbury, but they're running out of ore. What can you do that makes a difference to the world with a critical metal? What are your ambitions for Ontario for nickel?
Well, should I answer that, I guess?
There you go.
No. Well, I'll tell you what we don't want. We don't want the nickel from Indonesia. It's powered by coal, and it's financed by the Chinese, and it's the tailings goes to the ocean. If you contrast that to how we mine in Northern Ontario, what our brand is, I'll pick on Canada Nickel. I mean, Canada Nickel, after the next round of drilling, will have the largest resource of nickel globally. Their fleet will be powered by hydrogen. Then to generate the hydrogen, they'll burn natural gas, which creates CO2, and will sequester the CO2 with serpentine. That's it's tied into the discussion earlier this morning in an earlier panel. That's the brand of Ontario. It's also a mistake to think that there's no new nickel resources in Sudbury. They are. They're deeper, and they're all, again, developing in an environmentally friendly way. There's a Polish company that's the Victoria mine. And I'll mention this in case you don't know it, but the discharge water in every single mine in Northern Ontario is cleaner than the intake water. That's our brand. That's how we mine. The Victoria mine is so clean with their discharge water. It was like distilled water. The ministry said, you're going to have to add a few more elements in there because it's too clean. That's our brand. You take a look at the nickel mines, the underground mines all across Northern Ontario. They're getting off diesel and they're getting onto electrical because we've got the grid that's able to do that. The large part of our grid in Northern Ontario is hydroelectric. There's excess capacity of electrical hydro capacity in Northern Ontario, 3,570 megawatts. In Northern Ontario, in Northwestern Ontario, they got the Jackfish site itself is 700 megs as well. So it's everything we do in Ontario to attract the investment into Ontario, and I think the average investor globally, they want to make sure that their dollars invested in the rate jurisdiction for all the reasons that we talk about.
Is there one more question? Was there over there?
Hi, I'm Trésor Chevaux, and my question is to Ross. I was telling Rick yesterday how listening to your podcast when you started early and you were doing all this, finding all these properties, even in Sierra Leone, kept me going. I went through the same thing. So my question is, do you still have the same passion to as where you started? And if there's been a change since that you are more established and you have had a great success, is it a shift in your mind, or you still have the very same passion that you had and you're still doing things as you started?
Thank you. I'll just be brief. I mean, I could go on for a long time on that question, but basically, I've been in this game a long time, since my first public company in '85, so almost 40 years. And I've been working, as I think you might show some slides later, since 1970. That was my very first summer in the bush. So I've kind of followed a lot of, the trends and cycles and stuff and different metals. And, today, the thing about doing things anytime, things are different. Things have evolved. Like the market today is fundamentally different than it was 30 years ago. And so you've kind of got to adapt to that and try to figure out where it's going. It's not so much what it is like today, it's where it's going, that you need to build a company around. But basically, for me, being an entrepreneur in a game like the mining industry, it's been a wonderful journey. It's been super fulfilling. We've created a lot of wealth with a great group of people I work with. It's a real team effort, of course. You can't do any of this yourself. And I really think for young people coming into the industry today, it's it should be just as exciting than it was for me, in a different way. Things have evolved, but then kids are different today than my peers when I was young. It's, education's different, regulations are different, a lot of things are different, but I think it's just as great a time as it ever has been, maybe even better. This is a really exciting time to be in the mining industry because of this incredible shift we're now having in the energy transition away from fossil fuels into more minerals, and the critical minerals particularly.
Great answer, Ross. I think now we just want to close out. I want to thank my panel, but I think there's a little video clip to show. If I could cue the desk at the back and
Have you heard? There's a place where it's all happening. A place that's rebuilding its economy by connecting northern mines with southern manufacturing might. Where the economic outlook grows stronger every day, with over $44 billion in new investments in the first electric vehicle and battery plants in Canada. A place where more people are working today than ever before, taking home bigger paychecks. Where clean, affordable nuclear energy is powering economic growth for everyone. And what if we told you that place is Ontario, the place you already call home?